good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we are leaving the modern world behind to embark on a journey through time, luxury, and the rhythmic pulse of the rails. Get cozy, settle in, and let's begin our journey on the Orient Express. And among all the engines that traversed the continent, none carried the weight of dreams quite like the Express d'Orient. The station is a cacophony of sound, yet as you approach platform 4, the chaos seems to give way to a structured, elegant hum. The locomotive is a deep, shimmering black, its brass fittings polished until they glow like fallen stars in the dim station light. Steam escapes from the undercarriage in rhythmic gasps, obscuring the wheels in a low-lying mist, making the entire train look as though it is floating, tethered to the earth only by the weight of its own importance. These carriages are not the wooden crates of the common commuter. These are the wagon's light teak-paneled masterpieces, heavy with the promise of comfort. These are the conductors and valets of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagonslits, dressed in uniforms of deep chocolate brown and gold braid. They do not merely check tickets, they are the guardians of this rolling sanctuary. They handle leather trunks with the care of curators, whispering instructions to one another in a dozen different tongues. As you reach your carriage, a conductor bows slightly, a gesture of silent welcome that acknowledges you not just as a passenger, but as a guest of the road. You step up the polished brass stairs, leaving the soot and the shouting of the Parisian night behind. The transition is immediate. Inside, the world is hushed. The walls are lined with mahogany and teak, inlaid with delicate marquetry of flowers and mythical birds. The carpet beneath your feet is thick, dampening the sound of the city outside. The air smells of beeswax, old cognac, and the faint, crisp scent of starched linen. This is the interior of a dream, a space where time behaves differently. You find your compartment. It is a marvel of Victorian engineering, a private sanctuary where every inch of space has been considered. There are velvet armchairs that seem to invite you to shed the worries of the day. A small wash basin is hidden behind a clever wood panel, topped with silver fixtures. On a small table by the window, a crystal carafe of water catches the light of the gas lamps, which cast a warm, flickering amber glow over the room. Outside, the whistle blows. It is a long, mournful cry that echoes against the glass roof of the station, signaling the end of the stationary world. There is a sudden, heavy jolt, the first heartbeat of the journey end, then the slow, deliberate grind of metal on metal. But soon, the city begins to thin. The stone buildings give way to the dark shapes of trees and the open breadth of the French countryside. The rhythm of the rails begins to settle into a steady, hypnotic cadence. Clack, 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 clack. It is the heartbeat of the Orient Express, a sound that has lulled kings, spies, and poets into a deep, unshakable rest. In these early hours of the journey, the atmosphere on board is one of hushed anticipation. In the corridors, you might catch the silhouette of a diplomat nursing a glass of sherry, or the soft rustle of a silk gown as a countess makes her way to the dining car. Everyone here is a character in a story not yet written. They are suspended between their origins and their destinations, held in the amber of this luxurious transit. You lean your head against the cool glass of the window. The reflection of the cabin's warm interior overlays the passing darkness of the Marne Valley. The world outside is a blur of shadow, but inside you are safe. You are enveloped in the majesty of the Victorian imagination, a time when humanity believed it could conquer distance with elegance and grace. The engine out front, a beast of fire and water, continues to pull you deeper into the night. It cares nothing for the borders it will cross, or the mountains it will climb. It only knows the forward motion, the steady consumption of coal, and the heavy, rhythmic breath of steam. And as you sit there, feeling the gentle sway of the carriage, you realize that the journey has truly begun. The night is vast, the tracks are long, and the Orient Express is just beginning to find its stride. For now, there is nothing to do but listen to the song of the wheels and feel the weight of the velvet against your skin. The sun has set on Paris, and tomorrow the world will look entirely different, while the steam engine is the heart of the Orient Express. Its soul is found in the kitchen, cramped, vibrating, and searingly hot galley where the culinary traditions of a continent are distilled into moments of pure sensory bliss. To talk of the Orient Express is to talk of the finest cellar in Europe and a menu that defies the physical limitations of a moving train. In this final deep dive into the luxury of the road, we take a seat at the table once more to explore the food and drink that turned a 3-day journey into a legendary feast. The magic begins in the galley, a space that would make a modern chef recoil in disbelief. Here, in a corridor barely wider than a man's shoulders, the Brigade de Cuisine performs a nightly miracle. There is no refrigeration in the modern sense. Instead, heavy blocks of ice are loaded at every major station, tucked into zinc-lined lockers to keep the Atlantic oysters chilled and the thick slabs of Normandy butter firm. The heat from the coal-fired stoves is intense, competing with the movement of the train as it lurches through mountain passes. Yet, from this frantic high-pressure environment emerges a service of such poise and elegance that it rivals the finest restaurants of Paris or London. On the Orient Express, the menu is a living map of the geography outside the window. As we pull away from the Gare de l'Est, the table is dominated by the classics of the French terroir. We begin with a veloute of wild mushrooms gathered from the forests of the Marne, so creamy and rich it feels like silk upon the tongue. Then comes the seafood rushed from the coasts of Brittany to the station minutes before departure. Lobsters served à la thermidor, their shells gleaming under the gaslight, and soles from the English Page Channel, poached in a delicate wine of the Loire Valley. But as the train moves east, the flavors shift, mirroring the changing landscape. By the time we reach the borders of Bavaria and Austria, the light, herbal notes of French cuisine give way to the robust, earthy depths of Central Europe. We are served venison from the Black Forest, roasted with juniper berries and served with a reduction of dark cherries. The bread, baked fresh in the galley every morning, becomes denser, flavored with rye and caraway. It is a hearty, sophisticated transition that prepares the body for the cooler mountain air of the Alps. Then there is the wine. The cellar of the Orient Express is a curated journey in itself. The head sommelier is a man of immense knowledge, responsible for a collection that must survive the constant vibration and temperature shifts of the rail. Each course is a choreographed pairing. With the initial courses, there is the crisp, effervescent joy of a vintage moat and chandon, the bubbles dancing in the baccarat crystal like tiny diamonds. As the meat courses arrive, the white linens are graced with the deep, authoritative reds of Bordeaux Chateau, Lafite, or Latour, their tannins softened by the gentle, rhythmic rocking of the carriage. As we cross into Hungary and the Balkans, the wine list introduces us to the blood of the land. We taste the fiery, sun-drenched reds of Eger and the legendary Tokaji, the wine of kings, a liquid gold so sweet and complex it feels like drinking the history of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The glassware rings with a clear, musical note as the train crosses a bridge, the wine swaying in the glass, a crimson pendulum marking the passage of the miles. The ritual of the drink extends beyond the dining car. In the lounge, the atmosphere is defined by the blue hour, that time between the afternoon tea and the evening meal when the shadows grow long and the world feels suspended. This is the hour of the aperitif. The clink of ice in a silver shaker marks the creation of a sidecar or a gin fizz. For the more traditional traveler, there is the ritual of the absinthe, the green fairy poured slowly over a sugar cube into a glass of iced water, turning opaque and milky as the herbal aroma fills the air. It is a drink of poets and dreamers, perfectly suited to the flickering light of the passing countryside. But perhaps the most evocative sensory experience on board is the scent of the coffee. On the Orient Express, coffee is not merely a beverage, it is a signal. In the morning, it is the sharp, bracing scent of the French press, a wake-up call to the senses. But as we approach the borders of the Ottoman Empire, the coffee undergoes a transformation. It becomes the thick, potent, and aromatic cove of the East. It is brewed in brass sessives over hot sand, served in tiny porcelain cups that hold a liquid so dark and sweet it feels like an elixir of the night. To sip this coffee while watching the minarets of Constantinople appear on the horizon is to participate in a centuries-old bridge between cultures. The sweets, too, tell a story of arrival. We leave behind the delicate tarts and soufflés of Paris for the honeyed, nut-filled pastries of the Levant. Baklava, thin layers of filo pastry dripping with syrup and crushed pistachios, appears on the silver platters, alongside Turkish delight flavored with rosewater and lemon. This is the grand finale of the gastronomic journey, a final, sugary embrace from the East. Even the water on the Orient Express is part of the luxury. Bottled at the source in the springs of Evian or Perrier, it is served in heavy crystal carafes, a reminder that in this Victorian world, even the most basic element is treated with reverence. As the meal concludes, and the last of the cognac perhaps, a Hennessy vintage from the private reserves, poured into a warmed snifter, you realize that the food and drink have been more than just sustenance. They have been an education of the palate. They have allowed you to taste the soil of France, the forests of Germany, the plains of Hungary, and the sun of the Orient. The staff now begin to clear the tables, the silver clinking softly in the dimming light. The heavy white linens are folded, the crumbs of the artisanal bread whisked away. The dining car returns to its quiet, wood-paneled dignity, but the lingering aroma of roasted coffee, fine tobacco, and aged wine remains a ghostly reminder of the feast that has just passed. The Orient Express has fed not just the body, but the imagination. It has shown us that even in a world of iron and steam, there is a place for the delicate, the refined, and the delicious. We depart the table with a sense of immense satisfaction, our hearts full, and our senses heightened, ready to return to the rhythm of the rails and the mystery of the night. The kitchen fires are banked, the crystal is stowed, and the train rolls on. But the taste of the journey, the salt, the spice, the grape, and the grain will remain with you long after you have stepped onto the platform of the Golden Horn. It is the flavor of a world without borders, served on a silver platter at 60 miles per hour, while the dining car is a theater of light, and the sleeping berths are sanctuaries of rest. There is a third world existing within the Orient Express, a world of whispers, coded telegrams, and calculated glances. To the Victorian and Edwardian mind, the king of trains was the Spies Express, because it was the only reliable, high-speed link between the competing power centers of London, Paris, Vienna, and Constantinople. It became the primary artery for the secret history of Europe. In this section, we step into the shadows to explore the cloak-and-dagger reality of the journey. Imagine the corridor late at night. The gas lamps have been turned low, casting long, wavering shadows across the mahogany panels. The only sound is the rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels and the occasional groan of the carriage. In this dim light, that gentleman in the charcoal suit, sitting alone in the smoking karais, he, a businessman dealing in Balkan timber, or a British intelligence officer carrying a diplomatic pouch that could prevent a war. The woman in the heavy veil, speaking perfect, unaccented French to the conductors, she an exiled countess or a courier for the Russian Tsar. The Orient Express was a sovereign territory on wheels, and, for a spy, it offered the perfect environment, enforced proximity, and absolute anonymity. In the salons of Paris or the embassies of Pera, these individuals were watched. But on the train, suspended between borders, they were ghosts. A conversation held over a game of bridge in the lounge car might be a sophisticated exchange of state secrets. A dropped handkerchief in the vestibule might be a signal to a contact waiting at the next watering stop. History tells us that this was not merely the stuff of fiction. Real figures of immense shadow occupied these seats. We know that Robert Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boy Scouts, traveled the line as a British spy. He would pose as a butterfly collector, sketching the patterns on wings that were, in reality, the topographical layouts of enemy coastal fortifications and artillery batteries. He understood that on the Orient Express, a harmless hobby was the perfect camouflage for a dangerous mission. Then there was the legendary mystery of the diplomatic bag. Every journey carried official pouches, locked in heavy leather satchels and often chained to the wrists of young athletic couriers. These bags contained the raw nerves of empire's treaties, maps, and private letters between monarchs. The theft of such a bag was the ultimate prize. There are stories of couriers who did not sleep for the entire 3-day journey, sitting upright in their compartments with a loaded revolver hidden beneath a newspaper. watching the door as the train hurtled through the lawless stretches of the Balkan night. The staff, too, were part of this silent network. The conductors of the wagon slits were often approached by various secret services. They were offered bribes to accidentally leave a compartment door unlocked, or to report on who was speaking to whom in the dining car. A wise conductor saw everything and said nothing, maintaining a neutrality as polished as his brass buttons. They knew that the man in berth 7 was not who his passport claimed he was, but as long as he paid his fare and followed the etiquette of the rail, his secrets were safe within the teak walls. The geography of the route played its own role in the espionage. The border crossings were the moments of highest tension. As the train slowed for the inspection at the frontier, the game became physical. This was when documents were hidden behind the mirrors of the wash basins, or slipped into the lining of a heavy fur coat. It was a time of cold sweats and steady gazes. As the border police, often spies themselves, moved through the train with their lanterns and their suspicions. There is a specific atmosphere to a spy's journey. It is a heightened state of awareness. You begin to notice things, the way a passenger never leaves their luggage unattended, or the way a conversation abruptly stops when a waiter enters the room. You realize that the Orient Express is a sieve through which the secrets of the West are poured into the East. Even the architecture of the train supported this culture of secrecy. The private compartments, with their heavy curtains and stout locks, were ideal for clandestine meetings. Two men could enter a compartment as strangers and emerge 3 hours later, having redrawn the borders of a colonial territory. The rhythmic noise of the train provided a natural white noise, masking whispers and ensuring that the walls, though thin, did not have ears. As we approach the end of the line, the secrets do not disappear. They simply change hands. At the Cirkeci terminal, the shadows melt into the crowds of the bazaar. The courier vanishes into a waiting carriage. The collector of butterflies heads for the hills. The Orient Express stands on the platform, empty of its passengers, but heavy with the weight of the information it has carried. As you settle back into your seat and the train enters a dark tunnel, let your mind wander to the person in the next compartment. As the train clears the last vestiges of the Parisian suburbs, the evening settles into a deep, velvety blue. Inside the carriages of the Orient Express, the atmosphere shifts. The initial excitement of departure matures into a sophisticated calm. It is now the hour of the evening meal, the centerpiece of the day, and the true heart of the journey. You step out of your compartment and into the narrow wood-paneled corridor. The floor beneath you sways with a rhythmic, predictable grace, a gentle oscillation that requires a slight adjustment of your stride, turning a simple walk into a sort of elegant dance. As you move toward the dining car, the sensory landscape changes. The scent of coal smoke from the engine, which lingers faintly in the vestibules, is gradually overtaken by more delicate aromas, the savory depth of a roasting pheasant, the sharp citrus of a squeezed lemon, and the unmistakable, buttery richness of French pastry. You pass through the heavy, padded doors that separate the sleeping quarters from the social spaces, and suddenly, the world opens up into a vision of opulence. The dining car is a masterpiece of the Belle epoch. It is a room fashioned from mahogany and rosewood, with ceilings painted in soft creams and gold leaf that catch the flickering light of the table lamps. Each table is a private island of luxury, draped in heavy white damask linen, so crisp it seems to hold its own shape. On these tables, the silver service gleams heavy. Ornate forks and knives bearing the crest of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagenslits. The glassware is fine baccarat crystal, thin-stemmed, and ringing with a musical note at the slightest touch. You are seated by the maître d'hôtel, a man whose posture is as straight as a soldier's, and whose movements are as fluid as a diplomat's. He speaks in a low, soothing baritone, a voice designed to reassure and cater to the elite of Europe. As you settle into your plush leather chair, you begin to observe your fellow travelers. In this confined, moving space, the social hierarchies of the world are both reinforced and strangely blurred. At a table across from you sits a man who can only be an English diplomat. He is dressed in impeccable evening tails, his stiff collar white against his weathered, sun-reddened neck. He reads a copy of the Times 3 days old, yet still vital to him, while sipping a dry sherry. Beside him, perhaps his wife or a traveling companion, is a woman draped in furs, despite the warmth of the car, her fingers adorned with emeralds that flash green as she adjusts her lace veil. They speak in hushed tones, their words lost to the rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels below, but their presence adds a layer of quiet authority to the room. In the corner, a younger man with restless eyes and a charcoal-smudged waistcoat scribbles furiously in a leather-bound journal. Is he a poet seeking inspiration in the changing landscapes, or perhaps a spy, noting the faces of those who cross the borders of empires? The Orient Express is famous for such shadows. It is a vessel for secrets, a place where a conversation over a glass of Bordeaux can change the course of a treaty or start a scandal that will echo in the salons of Vienna. The service begins. On the Orient Express, dining is not merely a biological necessity, it is a ritual. The waiters, dressed in their white jackets and gloves, move with an uncanny ability to balance heavy silver trays against the vibration of the train. They do not walk, they slide, anticipating the tilt of the carriage as it rounds a bend in the tracks near the valley of the Marne. The first course arrives, a delicate consomme, clear as amber and steaming hot. It is followed by turbot in a light hollandaise sauce, the fish caught only hours ago and rushed to the station. Then comes the main course, perhaps a rack of lamb with rosemary, or a beef tenderloin prepared with a richness that defies the limitations of a galley kitchen. You look toward the windows. Outside, the French countryside has become a landscape of ghosts. The moon has risen, casting a silver pallor over the rolling hills and the dark clusters of woodland. Occasionally, the train passes a lonely farmhouse, its single lit window a tiny, fading spark in the vastness of the night. You see the reflection of the dining car's interior superimposed over the dark world outside. The glowing lamps, the white linens, and the silhouettes of the diners seem to float like a phantom palace through the woods of France. It is a surreal juxtaposition, the pinnacle of human artifice and comfort moving through the ancient, indifferent, dark, The wine is poured a deep, ruby-colored burgundy that catches the light of the gas lamps. As you sip, you feel the warmth spread through you, mingling with the hypnotic motion of the train. The conversation in the car rises in volume as the wine flows. You hear a mix of French, German, English, and Italian. This is the language of the Express, a polyglot symphony where the borders of nations are forgotten in favor of the shared experience of the journey. The staff here are the invisible directors of this play. The chef, working in a kitchen no larger than a closet, manages a heat that would be unbearable to most, yet he produces dishes that would rival the finest restaurants in Paris. The waiters manage the delicate egos of grand dukes and demanding heiresses with a grace that is almost spiritual. They are the keepers of the atmosphere, ensuring that the bubble of luxury remains unpopped by the realities of the iron road. As the meal draws to a close, a selection of cheeses is brought forth, followed by a dark chocolate torte and a glass of aged cognac. The air in the car grows heavier with the scent of coffee and the blue smoke of expensive cigars. This is the moment of greatest contentment. The hunger of the day is gone. The destination is still far away, and for this hour, you are suspended in a state of perfect transition. You watch an elderly woman at a nearby table. She is dressed in black silk, a widow perhaps, traveling to visit family in Sofia. She holds a small gold locket in her hand, staring out at the darkness. What does she see in the shadows of the passing trees? Does the rhythm of the train remind her of journeys taken 40 years ago, when the world was larger and the steam engine was a new and frightening miracle? The Orient Express is a bridge between the past and the future, carrying the memories of its passengers along with their luggage. The engine out front gives a sudden, sharp whistle, a piercing sound that cuts through the chatter of the dining car. It is a reminder that we are not in a stationary hotel, but a hurtling projectile of steel. We are crossing into the deeper night, moving away from the familiar lights of the west and toward the mysteries of the east. The tracks beneath us are a continuous ribbon of iron, vibrating with the power of the steam, carrying us toward the dawn. Slowly, the diners begin to disperse. The English diplomat folds his paper and offers a stiff nod to the room. The young poet closes his journal. One by one, the tables are cleared, the white linens folded, and the crystal glasses put away in their felt-lined drawers. The dining car, once a theater of light and sound, begins to dim. The gas lamps are turned low, casting long, dancing shadows across the wood panels. You stand up, feeling the slight weight of the cognac in your limbs. The rocking of the train feels more pronounced now, a soothing, heavy pull. You begin the walk back to your carriage, passing through the narrow corridors where the only light comes from the small, shaded lamps at floor level. The sound of the train is louder here, the roar of the wind against the teak exterior and the frantic, metallic chatter of the wheels. As you pass the galley, you see a glimpse of the kitchen staff, their faces slick with sweat, already preparing the dough for tomorrow's bread. Their work never truly stops. While the passengers sleep, the machine and its servants continue the tireless labor of the journey. You reach the door to your sleeping car. The air here is cooler, quieter. The valet stands at the end of the hall, a silent sentinel in his brown and gold uniform. He bows as you pass. You return to your compartment, where the bed has been turned down during your absence. The heavy wool blankets and silk sheets look inviting under the amber glow of the reading lamp. The day is over, but the journey continues. As you prepare for sleep, you realize that the Orient Express does not just move through space, it moves through the soul. It strips away the frantic pace of the world and replaces it with the ancient, steady rhythm of the rail. You pull back the heavy curtain of your window one last time. The moon is high now, illuminating a river that winds alongside the tracks like a ribbon of mercury. You lie down, the pillow soft against your head. The clack-clack of the wheels is closer now, a rhythmic lullaby that speaks of distance, of power, and of the long road ahead. Tomorrow you will wake up in a different world, but for tonight you are a passenger of the night, cradled in the heart of the great Victorian dream. To step aboard the Orient Express is to enter a microcosm of the Victorian social order. A rigid yet strangely fluid tapestry woven from the threads of class, service, and unspoken rules. Within these narrow tick corridors, the vast hierarchies of the 19th century are compressed into a space only 10 feet wide. Here, the king of trains acts as a floating stage where the drama of human status is performed daily, governed by an intricate code of conduct known as the etiquette of the rail. In the Victorian world, your position was defined by where you stood, what you wore, and most importantly who served you. On the Orient Express, this hierarchy is visible from the moment you look at the passenger list. In the first-class carriages, we find the crème de la crème, the diplomats with their leather dispatch boxes, the grand duchesses with their trunks of Parisian silk, and the industrial magnates who have built empires on coal and iron. These individuals do not merely travel, they occupy space with a quiet, inherited authority. However, the train is not composed only of the famous and the titled. Behind the mahogany doors of the service compartments and in the second-class carriages that occasionally trailed the main consist, there existed a secondary world. This was the world of the travelers in the shadows, the personal valets, the ladies' maids, the couriers, and the governesses. A wealthy Victorian rarely traveled alone. To move across the continent without a servant to press your collars or tend to your hair was considered a sign of distressing eccentricity or sudden financial ruin. These servants were the ghosts of the Orient Express. They moved through the same corridors as their masters, but were expected to remain essentially invisible. A lady's maid would spend hours in the cramped confines of a luggage van, sorting through trunk after trunk to find that specific evening gown required for dinner in Vienna, only to reappear in the sleeping car as a silent shadow, ready to assist her mistress without a word. There was a profound intimacy in this relationship. The servant knew the master's secrets, their physical frailties, and their private anxieties. Yet the etiquette of the era demanded a wall of professional silence. The social tapestry was further complicated by the etiquette of the shared space. In a London drawing room, you would never dream of speaking to a stranger without a formal introduction. But the Orient Express was a neutral zone. The sheer duration of the journey and the rhythmic swaying of the carriages acted as a social solvent. In the lounge car, the strict rules of the shore began to soften. A baronet might find himself sharing a light for his cigar with a wealthy merchant from Smyrna, or a French actress might engage in a witty exchange with an English colonel. There was, however, a very specific way to navigate these encounters. One never asked direct questions about another's business or destination. The Orient Express style was one of polite, generalized observation. You spoke of the weather in the Alps, the quality of the Bordeaux, or the fascinating architecture of the stations. To pry was to be not quite the thing. This anonymity was the train's greatest luxury. It allowed the spy to hide in plain sight, and the lovers to travel without the judgmental eyes of their local parish. The staff of the Company Internationale des Wagenslits were the ultimate arbiters of this social dance. They were more than just employees. They were diplomats of the rail. A head conductor had to possess the tact of a prime minister. He had to know how to seat a feuding pair of minor royals in the dining car, so they wouldn't have to catch each other's eye, and how to handle a demanding American millionaire who insisted on tea being served in the manner of a New York steakhouse. The waiters and valets practiced a form of anticipatory service. The goal was to fulfill a passenger's desire before the passenger was even aware of it. This required a deep understanding of national temperaments. They knew that the English preferred a certain chilly distance and prompt morning tea, while the French valued a spirited discussion about the menu, and the Russians expected a lavish, almost theatrical level of hospitality. The staff were the glue that held this disparate social tapestry together. Moving between the worlds of the elite, food was the great equalizer and the great divider. In the dining car, the seating arrangements were a silent map of the day's social standing. The best tables those in the center of the car. Away from the drafts of the doors were often reserved for the regular travelers or those of the highest rank. Yet, once the soup was served, the shared experience of the meal created a temporary community. For an hour or two, the dining car became a democratic space of sensory pleasure. The clink of silver on porcelain was a universal language. But even here, class was signaled by the way one held a fish knife, or the ease with which one navigated a complex multi-course menu. As night fell, and the passengers retired to their compartments, the social tapestry shifted again. The corridors became the domain of the night valets. In the dim light of the shaded lamps, the barriers of class were perhaps at their most stark. The elite slept in their nests of silk and wool, while just a few feet away, the men who made that sleep possible sat on small folding stools, watching the gauges and waiting for the ring of a bell. It was a symbiotic relationship, the comfort of the few built upon the tireless vigilance of the many. There was also the etiquette of the border. As the train crossed from one empire to another, the social order was momentarily challenged by the arrival of the customs officials. For a brief moment, the most powerful man on the train was not the duke in the stateroom, but the uniformed official with the ink-stained fingers and the heavy stamp. The passengers had to submit to the authority of the state, a reminder that even the Orient Express was subject to the laws of the earth. The way a passenger handled these intrusions with haughty disdain or polite cooperation revealed more about their character than any conversation in the lounge car. By the time the train approached the final reaches of the journey, a strange thing often happened. The rigid social structures of the departure in Paris had often transformed into a peculiar, traveling camaraderie. The shared experience of a snow-clogged track in the mountains or a particularly beautiful sunrise over the Danube created bonds that transcended the strict Victorian categories. People who would never have met in their ordinary lives found themselves exchanging addresses and promising to write. The Orient Express was a laboratory of human interaction. It showed that when you take people out of their fixed environments and set them in motion, the old rules begin to bend. The social tapestry was not a static thing. It was a living, breathing fabric that changed with the rhythm of the wheels. As you look around the dining car one last time before arrival, you see the reflection of an entire century. You see the fading world of the aristocracy, the rising power of the merchant class, and the quiet, essential strength of the service staff. They are all woven together in this silver needle of a train, moving toward a common destination. The etiquette of the rail has kept them in harmony, ensuring that the journey remains a masterpiece of human cooperation. The whistle blows, a long and mournful sound that signals the end of this temporary society. Soon, the Duke will return to his palace, the maid to her attic, and the merchant to his counting house. But for these few days, they have been part of something larger, moving tapestry of human life, stitched together by the iron rails and the magnificent rhythmic heart of the Orient Express. The dining cars, laughter, and the clinking of crystal have faded into a memory, replaced by the profound, mechanical solitude of the night. It is in these hours, between midnight and the first gray hints of dawn, that the train reveals its true character. It is a physical dialogue between the passenger and the path. When the train leans into a long, sweeping turn to the left, you feel the gentle pressure of the wall against your shoulder. Outside the window, the world is a gallery of shadows. Looking in at the gold-lit windows of the express, wondering who is inside and what lives they are leaving behind. This is the hour of the border crossing. In the Victorian era, the map of Europe was a patchwork of empires. The heavy grinding of the brakes creates a long, mournful squeal that echoes through the sleeping corridor. The wheels slip, then grip, and the journey resumes. The return of the rhythm is a relief. The ta-da-dum returns, faster now, as the train accelerates into the German night, heading toward the Black Forest. The Orient Express has always been a place for such dreaming. You think of the engineers who laid these tracks across mountain passes and through marshes, men who saw the iron road as the ultimate triumph of reason over nature. You think of George's Nagelmakers, the visionary who dreamed of this train after seeing the vastness of America, wanting to bring that sense of continental scale to the ancient, fragmented lands of Europe. As you turn over in your berth, the swaying of the carriage feels like the rocking of a ship on a calm sea. You are safe in your private chamber. The valet, somewhere in the shadows of the corridor, is still awake. You are traveling at nearly 60 miles per hour, terrifying, exhilarating speed for the 19th century. To the peasants in the fields, you are a streak of fire and light, a symbol of a future they can barely imagine. The scenery begins to change as the train enters the foothills of the mountains. In this state, the history of the regions you are passing through begins to color your thoughts. The temperature outside has dropped significantly, and a thin veil of frost begins to form at the corners of the window pane. There is a profound sense of gratitude that comes with such travel, the realization that while the world is harsh, the stars above the Black Forest are brilliant, untroubled by the smog of cities. They look down on the train as it winds its way like a silver needle through the dark green velvet of the pines. But for now, in the heart of the night, there is only the rhythm, the clack-clack of the rails, the sighing of the wood, the distant, powerful breath of the steam engine. You close your eyes and let the motion take you. You are no longer an individual with a name and a destination. You are a part of the machine, a traveler in the great Victorian slipstream. Rest now, for the engine never tires, and the tracks never end. The deep indigo grip of the night begins to loosen, not with a sudden flash, but with a gradual, ghostly thinning of the darkness. You find yourself stirring before the sun has even crested the horizon, pulled from your railway sleep by a change in the train's vibration. The engine is no longer laboring against the steep inclines of the high forest. It has found a flatter, faster gallop. The frost on your window pane begins to weep, turning into clear droplets that race each other across the glass as the train accelerates. The sun rises, not just on a new day, but on a new country. While you slept, the Orient Express has carried you across a border, through a mountain range, and into the heart of Central Europe. You hear the crisp shush-shush of his horsehair brush against a wool coat, followed by the faint metallic clink of a silver tray. There is a gentle, discreet knock at your door. 3 precise raps. Good morning, monsieur. We are 90 minutes from Munich. On it sits a glass of fresh orange juice, a porcelain pot of thick, dark coffee that smells of roasted chicory and distance, and a single, perfectly croissant. This is the first taste of the day, a sharp, bracing contrast to the heavy, velvet dreams of the night. The Bavarian countryside is a masterpiece of order and pastoral beauty. He pulls a lever here, unlatches a brass fitting there, and with a series of rhythmic clicks and folds, the bed disappears. The heavy wool blankets are whisked away, and the plush velvet armchairs return to their rightful place. The private sanctuary of the night is once again a sophisticated sitting room. The wash basin, hidden behind its mahogany panel, is revealed. The water in the pitcher is steaming. The valet has ensured that the heat of the engine-S boiler has been diverted to provide you with the comfort of a warm shave or a refreshing wash. The floral arrangements on the table's roses and lily have been changed overnight, their petals still holding beads of moisture. The passengers, too, seem changed. The English diplomat from the night before is now dressed in a sharp tweed traveling suit, his spectacles perched on his nose as he studies a map of the Austro-Hungarian Empire spread across the table. The mysterious young poet is eating a bowl of fruit with an intensity that suggests he has unslept, his fingers stained with the ink of a dozen new stanzas. There is a sense of collective achievement among the travelers. Together, you have survived the night, crossed a continent, and arrived at the threshold of a new world. And jars of preserves made from the berries of the Black Forest. The stop is brief but frantic. From your window, you watch the theater of the platform. Newsboys in flat caps run alongside the carriages, shouting the morning headlines in German. Porters heave heavy leather trunks onto trolleys. New passengers board perhaps a Bavarian businessman in a heavy fur-trimmed coat, or an opera singer traveling to Vienna for a premiere. There is an exchange of mailbags, the heavy canvas sacks tossed with practiced ease into the luggage van, then the whistle, the sharp, commanding signal of the station master. The train and the river seem to be in a race, both moving with a relentless liquid grace toward the east. You spend the late morning in the lounge car, a space of deep leather sofas and shared tables. Here, the social barriers continue to melt. you might find yourself in conversation with a Hungarian count about the quality of the local horses, or listening to a French archaeologist describe the ruins he hopes to find in the hills of Anatolia. In this Victorian bubble, you are free to be whomever you wish. The landscape becomes vast and horizontal, a sea of grass where the only landmarks are the occasional well pole or a distant herd of horses. The speed of the train feels more apparent here, where there are no hills to hide the horizon. You feel the immense power of the locomotive as it eats up the miles, a triumph of steam and steel over the sheer scale of the earth. The afternoon settles into a quiet, golden languor. The initial energy of the morning has passed, replaced by a comfortable, rhythmic boredom, the kind of boredom that only the wealthy and the well-traveled can truly enjoy. It is a time for reading, for napping, or for simply staring out the window at the endless, undulating beauty of the world. The staff move through the cars like shadows, anticipating needs before they are spoken. A fresh pot of tea appears at your elbow. A curtain is adjusted to block the glare of the sun. The floor beneath you continues its steady, swaying dance. You are deep in the heart of the journey now. The west is a fading memory, and the east is a growing whisper on the wind. The sun begins its long, slow descent over the rolling landscape of Lower Austria, casting shadows that stretch like thin, dark fingers across the vineyards. As the afternoon light matures into a rich, honeyed gold, a change occurs in the very air of the train. There is a perceptible sharpening of the senses, a mounting electricity. We are approaching Vienna, the gleaming heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the city of waltzes, grand cafes, and imperial intrigue. To travel to Vienna by the Orient Express is to approach a throne. The tracks here are well-worn and prestigious, a grand boulevard of iron, as the train slows for its entry into the city. The wilder stretches of the Danube give way to manicured estates and the suburban villas of the Viennese elite. You see the flash of white stone and the manicured green of gardens, where, perhaps, a string quartet is playing for a garden party, their music drowned out by the authoritative roar of our passing. The entry into the Westbahnhof is a sensory feast. The station is a cathedral of glass and soot, a monument to the dual nature of the 19th century, its elegance and its industrial grit. As the train glides to a halt, the steam from the engine curls upward to the high arched ceiling, creating an artificial cloud that catches the rays of the setting sun. The platform is a sea of activity. Here, the uniforms change. The Austrian officials wear high collars and stiff-plumed caps. The air smells of coffee and whipped cream, the legendary Schlagobers of the Viennese cafes, drifting from the station's elegant refreshment rooms. In Vienna, the Orient Express sheds its skin and takes on new life. A significant portion of the passengers may disembark here, their journeys concluded in the shadow of the Hofburg Palace. In their place, new characters ascend the brass steps. You watch them from your window, a group of Hungarian officers in dashing, braided hussar jackets, their spurs jingling against the stone platform. A silent, veiled woman accompanied by a mountain of leather trunks embossed with the crest of a minor Balkan principality. And perhaps a group of English archaeologists, their sun-bleached hats and sturdy boots marking them as men of the field, bound for the dust of Troy or the ruins of Ephesus. The whistle blows a sharp, imperious sound that rings through the station. With a heavy, deliberate shove, the engine begins to move once more. As we leave the West Bahnhof, we are leaving behind the familiar comforts of the great Western capitals. Behind us lie Paris, Strasbourg, Munich, and Vienna, cities of light, law, and shared European history. Ahead lies the frontier. The tracks now lead toward the east, toward the rugged peaks of the Carpathians and the vast untamed stretches of the Balkan Peninsula. The transition is felt almost immediately. As the lights of Vienna fade into the twilight, the landscape begins to lose its manicured imperial order. The hills become steeper, the forests denser and more secretive. This is the hour of the blue train, when the deep azure of the sky meets the darkening silhouette of the earth. Inside the carriages, the gas lamps are lit once more, their warm, flickering glow creating an intimate world that feels increasingly isolated from the wild world outside. Dinner on this second night carries a different weight than the first. The initial politeness among the passengers has evolved into a shared, unspoken bond. You are now the veterans of the road. In the dining car, the conversation is more animated, punctuated by the popping of champagne corks. The menu reflects the change in geography, perhaps a spicy Hungarian goulash, or a rich, dark venison served with forest berries. The wine is no longer the light burgundies of France, but the heavy, sun-drenched reds of the Hungarian plains or the crisp, volcanic whites of the Austrian hills. As you sit at your table, the train begins to climb. You are entering the foothills of the Alps, heading toward the Semmering Pass. This is a masterpiece of engineering, the first mountain railway in the world to be built with a standard gauge. The engine's rhythm changes from a gallop to a heavy, rhythmic pulse. Chuff, chuff, chuff. Each breath of the locomotive is a testament to the power of steam over gravity. The train twists and turns, doubling back on itself as it ascends the steep gradients. Through the window, you see the engine far ahead, its firebox glowing a fierce, demonic red against the dark mountainside. A dragon of fire pulling its precious cargo of silk and silver toward the stars. The air in the dining car grows cooler as the altitude increases, despite the warmth of the lamps and the press of bodies. You feel the thinness of the mountain air, a crispness that cuts through the scent of cigars and perfume. Outside, the world has become vertical. To one side of the train, the mountain wall rises up, a jagged cliff of limestone. To the other, a terrifyingly beautiful abyss where the tops of pine trees are illuminated by the light spilling from the carriage windows. There is a sense of adventure now that was absent in the rolling hills of France. We are entering the lands of legend, the territories of the Brothers Grimm and the ancient folklore of the Danube. The passengers sense it too. The English diplomat has put away his newspaper and is staring out at the dark peaks, his expression one of quiet wonder. The Hungarian officers are telling stories in low, melodic voices, their laughter echoing in the wood-paneled car. The Orient Express is no longer just a luxury hotel. It has become a sanctuary of civilization, moving through a landscape that feels ancient, powerful, and slightly dangerous. The staff, as always, remain the calm center of the storm. The waiters balance their trays with an even greater displays of athleticism as the train tilts into the sharp mountain curves. The maître d'hôtel moves from table to table, his presence a reassurance that despite the wildness of the world outside, the standards of the wagonslits will never waver. They are the guardians of this Victorian dream, ensuring that the transition from the west to the east is as seamless as a stitch in a silk gown. As the meal concludes and the coffee is served, the train reaches the summit of the pass. For a moment, the rhythm levels out, and the engine seems to catch its breath. We are at the roof of the world. Below us, the valleys of Austria and Hungary are hidden in a sea of mist, and above us, the stars are so bright and numerous they seem to vibrate with the same energy as the train. You return to your compartment, but you find you are not yet ready for sleep. The excitement of the mountains is still thrumming in your veins. You sit by the window, the lamp turned low, and watch as the train begins its descent toward the east. The mountains gradually soften into the high plateaus of the Balkans. The villages we pass now look different. The church spires are replaced by the rounded domes of Orthodox chapels, and the houses are built of heavy stone and dark timber, designed to withstand the fierce winds of the continental interior. This is the threshold of the Orient. In the darkness beyond the window, empires have risen and fallen, and the tracks we follow are laid over the bones of ancient roads. The Orient Express is a modern intruder here, a streak of light and technology piercing through a world that still lives by the cycles of the moon and the seasons. Yet there is a strange harmony in it. The train does not conquer the landscape. It honors it by moving through it with a grace that matches the majesty of the peaks. The night deepens. The clack-clack of the rails is more echoic here. The sound bouncing off the stone cuttings and the wooden bridges that span deep, rushing rivers. You feel a sense of immense distance. Paris is a world away. Constantinople is a growing promise. Between the two lies this vast, nocturnal middle ground, a place of shadows and shifting borders. As you finally settle into your berth, the swaying of the carriage is more pronounced, a rugged, spirited motion that reflects the terrain. The engine out front is now running downhill, a fast, rhythmic clatter that speaks of the urgency of the road. You close your eyes, and in the half-sleep of the railway, you imagine the steam from our engine mingling with the mists of the Balkan valleys, a white ribbon of progress winding its way through the ancient dark. The journey has entered its most mysterious phase. We are no longer in the familiar lands of the morning. We are the guests of the East, travelers in a world where the sun rises earlier and the shadows run deeper. The Orient Express carries us on, its heart of fire beating steadily, its wheels singing the song of the long iron road. Rest now, for tomorrow we wake in the heart of the mountains, and the air will taste of pine, wood smoke, and the unknown. The morning arrives with a sudden dramatic clarity. As you pull back the heavy velvet curtains of your compartment, you are not greeted by the soft mists of the French valleys or the manicured order of the Austrian estates. Instead, the world outside has become a cathedral of stone and pine. We are deep in the heart of the Balkan mountains, climbing through the rugged passes of the Carpathians and the Balkan range itself. The light is different, here sharper, colder, and of a brilliant crystalline blue, that makes every jagged peak and deep green gorge stand out in stark relief. The Orient Express is no longer gliding, it is wrestling with the earth. You can hear the locomotive far ahead, its breath now a deep, guttural roar as it fights the steep gradients. The rhythm of the wheels has slowed to a heavy, deliberate, mechanical determination that vibrates through the floor of the carriage. This is the wild frontier of the journey, the point where the luxury of the West meets the raw, untamed majesty of the East. The air that seeps through the window frames is thin and carries the scent of ancient things. Damp earth, crushed needles of black pine, and the sharp mineral temps of limestone. As the sun clears the high ridges, it illuminates the deep valleys below, where the mists still linger like pools of milk. You see narrow, rushing rivers that have carved their way through the rock over millennia, their waters a frothing turquoise against the gray stone. Occasionally, the train crosses a high, spindly trestle bridge. For a few heart-pounding seconds, the ground vanishes, and you are suspended in mid-air, looking down hundreds of feet into a dizzying abyss. The engineering of the wagon slits feels like a miracle, fragile, elegant thread of iron and silk draped across a landscape that has never known a master. In the corridor, the valet is already moving, his pace slightly more urgent than the day before. He brings the morning tea in a glass held by a silver filigree holder, pods decanic reflecting the shifting cultural landscape. The tea is strong and dark, sweetened with a spoonful of plum jam, a local tradition that has found its way onto the train's menu. As you sip the warming liquid, you watch the villages of the high Balkans flicker past. These are not the prosperous farmsteads of Bavaria. These houses are fortresses of stone and heavy timber, built to withstand winters that can bury a town in a single night. You see shepherds dressed in thick sheepskin cloaks, leaning on long wooden staves as they watch their flocks. They do not wave as the train passes. They simply watch with a quiet, timeless gaze. To them, the Orient Express is a shimmering ghost, a flash of another century cutting through their eternal world. There is a profound sense of stepping back in time. In the salons of Paris, the talk is of electricity and the coming of the 20th century. Here, the world is still governed by the seasons, the mountains, and the ancient laws of hospitality. As the morning progresses, you make your way to the lounge car. The atmosphere among the passengers has shifted again. The light-hearted chatter of the previous nights has been replaced by a contemplative silence. Everyone is drawn to the windows. The English archaeologist is no longer reading. He is sketching the profile of a distant ruin, a crumbling stone tower that might have been a Roman outpost or a medieval watchman's haunt. The Hungarian officers speak in hushed tones, perhaps discussing the complex politics of the borders. We are now skirting the shifting lines between the Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman spheres of influence. The Orient Express is the only place in the world where these disparate forces coexist in peace. Inside this moving palace, the tensions of the continent are held in check by the rituals of the dining table and the shared rhythm of the rails. We are a sovereign nation of travelers, united by our destination and our common appreciation for the finer points of life. The tracks begin to descend as we approach the border of the Ottoman Empire. The landscape softens slightly, the jagged peaks giving way to rolling plateaus of yellow grass and scrub oak. The architecture of the stations we pass begins to change. The sharp, Gothic spires of the west are replaced by the soft, rounded domes and the slender, white needles of men. At a small watering stop, you step out onto the platform for a few moments to breathe the mountain air. The sound of the steam engine's release is deafening in the quiet valley. On the platform, a vendor sells small cups of thick, sludge-like coffee and pieces of rose-scented Turkish delight. The air is warmer now, carrying a hint of the Mediterranean and the dry heat of the Anatolian plains. Back on board, the preparations for the final leg of the journey begin. The staff are tireless, while the passengers marvel at the scenery. The conductors are busy coordinating with local station masters, ensuring the path ahead is clear of snow or debris. The chef is already planning the evening's feast, which will feature the spices and flavors of the Orient's saffron, cumin, and pomegranate. As the sun reaches its zenith, the train enters a long, winding tunnel. For several minutes, the world is plunged into an absolute, velvety blackness. The only sound is the roar of the engine and the frantic chatter of the wheels, amplified by the stone walls. In this darkness, you feel the immense weight of the mountains above you. Then, a pinprick of light appears, growing larger and brighter until the train bursts out into the sunlight of a new world. The descent toward the plains of Thrace has begun. The mountains are now behind us, a formidable wall of purple and gray on the horizon. Ahead lies the vast, sun-baked expanse that leads to the sea. The pace of the train increases, the wheels singing a faster, more triumphant song. We are no longer climbing. We are falling toward the coast, toward the meeting point of Europe and Asia. In these afternoon hours, the Orient Express feels like it is at the height of its power. It has conquered the mountains and the borders. It has carried its passengers through the heart of the old world and is now delivering them to the threshold of the new. You feel a sense of immense privilege to be part of this transit. The Victorian age believed that there was no problem that could not be solved by engineering and elegance. And as you watch the Balkan landscape recede, it is easy to believe they were right. The shadows begin to lengthen once more, but they are different from the shadows of the previous days. They are longer, softer, and carry the warmth of the southern sun. The journey is entering its final movement. The king of trains rolls on, unwearied by the miles, its brass glowing in the afternoon light, its steam a white banner against the deepening blue of the sky. You lean back in your chair, the rhythm of the rails now a part of your own pulse. The journey through the Balkans has been a passage through the soul of the continent, rugged, beautiful, and ancient. But the greatest mystery still lies ahead. Somewhere beyond the shimmering horizon, where the land meets the water, the spires of Constantinople are waiting. For now, there is only the steady, rhythmic motion, the clack-clack of the iron, the sighing of the wind against the deep, resonant breath of the steam. We are travelers in the great Victorian dream, and the dream is far from over as the afternoon sun begins to dip lower, painting the plains of Thrace in hues of burnt sienna and dusty gold. The Orient Express enters the final, most evocative chapter of its transcontinental odyssey. We have left the craggy, vertical world of the Balkans behind. The landscape has flattened into a vast, rolling expanse of dry grasses and ancient tumulibarial mounds of kings who ruled these lands long before the first steam engine was ever conceived. The air flowing through the half-opened windows of the corridor has changed again. The biting chill of the mountain peaks has vanished. replaced by a warm, salt-tinged breeze that carries the scent of wild thyme, sun-baked earth, and the distant, unspoken promise of the Sea of Marmara. We are now approaching the frontier of the Ottoman Empire. To the Victorian traveler, this was more than a mere border crossing. It was a transition between worlds, a passage from the familiar logic of the West into the enchanting, labyrinthine mystery of the Orient. The train slows as it nears the border station. The brakes sigh a long, weary hiss of steam that mirrors the collective breath of the passengers. Outside, the platform is a kaleidoscope of a disappearing world. Ottoman officials in crimson fezzes and long, dark Stambolini coats move with a deliberate, unhurried grace. They carry brass-topped canes and heavy ledgers bound in green leather. The language here is a musical, percussive tumble of Turkish and Greek, punctuated by the familiar French of the train's staff. The border ritual on this final evening is the most elaborate of all. Documents are scrutinized with a lingering intensity, for this is the gateway to the Sultan's domain. You watch from the window as the king of trains is inspected by men whose ancestors might have ridden across these same plains on horseback. There is a profound sense of two eras colliding. The pinnacle of 19th century industrial might resting momentarily in the heart of an empire that feels as old as the earth itself. Once the firmans are signed and the heavy iron gates are swung open, the engine gives a triumphant, chest-rattling blast of its whistle. We are moving again, but the pace has changed. There is no longer the frantic hurry of the European Midlands. The train seems to savor these final miles, gliding over the sun-parched earth with a regal, measured stride. Inside the carriages, the final evening on board begins. This is the grand gala of the journey. In the sleeping cars, the valets are assisting the gentlemen with their evening studs, and the ladies with the intricate lacings of their gowns. There is a celebratory atmosphere, a shared realization that we have crossed a continent together. Friendships formed over the past 3 days, brief, intense, and destined to end at the station, are solidified over the final dressing. The dining car has been transformed once more. The white linens are replaced with heavy, embroidered cloths of deep crimson and gold. The floral arrangements now feature exotic blooms, heavy-headed lilies, dark roses, and sprigs of jasmine that fill the car with an intoxicating, heady perfume. The menu is a masterpiece of cultural synthesis. The chef, drawing inspiration from the lands we are entering, serves a feast that bridges the gap between Paris and the Golden Horn. You begin with a chilled melon soup, followed by a delicate pilaf of lamb infused with saffron and studded with pine nuts and currants. The wine is a rich, heavy vintage from the slopes of Mount Lebanon, dark as a garnet and smelling of cedar and spice. As you eat, the rhythmic clack-clack of the rails provides a steady, hypnotic bass line to the chatter of the diners. The conversation is no longer about the news of London or the politics of Vienna. It is about the wonders that await in Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia, the Grand Bazaar, and the shimmering waters of the Bosporus. Outside, the Thracian dusk is a thing of legend. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple, and the first stars begin to appear, hanging low and bright over the darkening horizon. Occasionally, the train passes a small village, its presence marked only by a few flickering oil lamps and the silhouette of a lone minaret reaching toward the heavens like a silent prayer. You feel a sense of immense peace. The Orient Express has become a sanctuary, a silver bubble of civilization protected by its own rhythm and its own laws. As the meal draws to a close, the maître d'hôtel brings out a tray of heavy silver pots. The coffee is no longer the filtered brew of the West. It is the black gold of the East, thick, sweet, and served in tiny, handleless cups. Beside it sits a platter of lokum, the rose-scented Turkish delight, dusted in powdered sugar that looks like fallen snow. The air in the car grows heavy with the scent of this coffee and the blue, aromatic smoke of Egyptian cigarettes. You find yourself sitting longer than usual at the table, reluctant to break the spell. The English diplomat is sharing a laugh with the Hungarian officers, their differences forgotten in the shared glow of the evening. The young poet is staring out at the dark plains, his pen silent for once, simply absorbing the vastness of the moment. The Orient Express has done its work. It has woven a disparate group of strangers into a temporary, traveling family. Eventually, you make your way back to your compartment. The valet has already prepared it for the final night. The bed is turned down, and a small, silk-bound book of Ottoman poetry has been left on your pillow, a parting gift from the wagon's lids. You sit by the window, the interior lamps turned off, allowing the moonlight to flood the room. The train is now running along the coast. Through the darkness, you catch the occasional silver flash of the Sita Mara. It is calm and vast, reflecting the moonlight in a long, shimmering path that seems to lead directly to the edge of the world. The sound of the train changes here. The roar of the wind is softer, and the rhythmic beat of the wheels is dampened by the sandy soil of the coastline. You realize that this is the last time you will fall asleep to this particular lullaby. The ta-dam that has governed your heartbeat for the past 3 days is nearing its end. Tomorrow, the iron road will terminate at the water's edge. There is a touch of melancholy in the thought, a sense of loss for the transient, perfect world of the train. The Orient Express is a reminder that the journey is often more meaningful than the arrival, that the space between. Here and there is where the true stories of our lives are written. The engine out front gives a long, low whistle. It is a sound of recognition. Somewhere in the distance, hidden behind the curve of the coast, the lights of a great city are beginning to glow. The sublime port is calling, but for now, the night is still ours. You pull the heavy silk sheets around you, feeling the gentle, familiar sway of the carriage. The air is warm. The sea is silver. The rhythm is eternal. You drift into your final railway sleep, cradled by the history and the luxury of the great Victorian dream. The miles are few now, but the memories are vast. When you wake, the world will be transformed, and the iron rails will have delivered you to the very heart of the sun. The final morning begins not with the herald of a valet's knock, but with the undeniable change in the light. It is a light of liquid gold, reflected off the surface of the Sea of Marmara, which now runs alongside the tracks like a loyal companion. As you pull back your curtains for the last time, you find the world has transformed into a Byzantine mosaic. To your right, the water is a brilliant, sparkling sapphire, dotted with the white sails of local dhows and the dark, low profiles of steamships from every corner of the globe. To your left, the ancient Theodosian walls begin to appear, vast, crumbling ramparts of stone and brick that have defended this city for over 1,000 years. The Orient Express is no longer a creature of the open plains. It is now a thread being pulled through the needle's eye of history. The train slows as it hugs the shoreline, winding its way around the base of the Seraglio Point. above you. Rising like a dream from the cypress trees are the domes and minarets of the Topkapi Palace. This is the moment every passenger has been waiting for. You are about to trade this controlled, rhythmic sanctuary for the magnificent, sensory explosion of the East. In your compartment, the valet performs his final duty. He helps you into your traveling coat and ensures that every piece of your luggage is accounted for. There is a moment of shared acknowledgement between you. He has been the silent architect of your comfort for thousands of miles, a guardian of your sleep and a provider of your morning light. You leave a generous gratuity on the mahogany tabula gesture of gratitude for the invisible labor that makes the Orient Express a miracle of human industry. The train begins its final approach. The tracks lead us through the very gardens of the Sultan, a rare privilege afforded to this prestigious line. We pass beneath ancient arches and alongside the shadows of marble kiosks. The scent of salt water becomes overwhelming, mingling with the smell of coal smoke and the morning's first street fires. We are moving into the heart of Istanbul. Then, the final turn. The engine gives one last, long, triumphant whistle that echoes off the stone walls and across the waters of the Golden Horn. We glide into the Sirkechi terminal. This station is the architectural manifestation of the journey itself, grand, Orientalist masterpiece of red brick and stained glass, designed to welcome the weary traveler with the splendor of the Ottoman Empire. As the wheels finally cease their chatter and the train comes to a definitive hissing halt, a profound silence falls over the interior of the carriage. The rhythm that has governed your life for 3 days is gone. The journey of the rails has ended. The doors are opened, and the sounds of Constantinople flood into the car. It is a roar of human energy. The shouting of porters in a dozen languages, the clanging of tram bells, the distant call to prayer from a nearby mosque, and the frantic, musical bartering of the marketplace. You step down the brass stairs and onto the platform. The ground feels strangely solid beneath your feet, lacking the gentle, swaying life of the train. On the platform, the theater of the Orient Express reaches its finale. You see the Hungarian officers being greeted by a local attaché. You see the English archaeologist disappearing into the crowd, his mind already among the ruins. And you see the mysterious veiled woman being whisked away in a private carriage. The social bubble of the train has burst. and its inhabitants are being scattered into the vast, churning sea of the city. You stand for a moment and look back at the train. It sits there, dusty from the plains of Thrace and the mountains of the Balkans, but still radiating an aura of untouchable elegance. The brass plates of the Company International Day wagon's lids catch the Turkish sun. The locomotive is cooling, its metal contracting with a series of small, rhythmic pings that sound like a fading heartbeat. It has fulfilled its promise. It has carried you across the width of the world, through time and space, to the very edge of the East. Behind you, the porters are already loading your trunks onto a carriage bound for the Pera Palace Hotel. You take one last breath of the coal-scented air of the station and turn toward the exit. Ahead of you lies the bridge across the Golden Horn, the bustling streets of Galata, and the infinite mysteries of the Bosporus. The Victorian dream of the rail has delivered you to the reality of the Orient. The journey is over, but as you step out into the blinding, beautiful light of Constantinople, you realize that the rhythm of the Orient Express will stay with you. In the quiet moments of the night, you will still hear the clack-clack of the rails. You will still feel the gentle sway of the mahogany walls, and you will remember that for a few short days you were not just a traveler, but a guest of the most magnificent machine ever built by the hand of man. The sun is high, the city is waiting, and the Iron Road has brought you home to a world you have never seen. The Iron Road has reached the sea. But the story of the Orient Express does not end at the Sirkechi terminal. As you stand on the platform, watching the steam from the locomotive dissipate into the humid air of the Golden Horn, you realize that the train has left a permanent mark upon your spirit. In the Victorian imagination, the Orient Express was never merely a mode of transport. It was a symbol of the era's supreme confidence, a belief that the rough edges of the world could be smoothed by a ribbon of steel and a silver service. To understand the legacy of this journey, one must look back at the trail we have blazed across the continent. We have traveled over 1,800 miles, crossing the borders of empires and the boundaries of cultures. In doing so, the Orient Express did something profound. It turned the vast, frightening distance of the East into a navigable, luxurious experience. It invited the world to witness the transition of the landscape from the comfort of a velvet armchair. It turned the wild Balkans and the mysterious plains of Thrace into a moving gallery. A series of framed portraits viewed through a polished pane of glass. This is the afterglow of the journey, the way the experience lingers in the mind like the scent of a heavy perfume in a closed room. Even as you settle into the Pera Palace Hotel, the rhythmic ghost of the rails remains. When you close your eyes, you still feel the lateral sway of the carriage. You still hear the distant, mournful cry of the whistle echoing through a mountain pass. The train has rewired your senses, replacing the frantic, disjointed pace of city life with the steady, purposeful cadence of the machine. The legacy of the Orient Express is also written in the stories it inspired. It became a theater of the human condition, because it was a confined space where the elite of the world were held in suspension for days at a time. It became a hothouse for drama, intrigue, and romance. To the Victorian mind, the train was a rolling stage. Within its thick walls, grand dukes rubbed shoulders with opera singers, and arms dealers shared cigars with archaeologists. It was a place where identities could be shed or invented. In the anonymity of the rail, a passenger could be anyone, provided they had the ticket and the tailoring to match the setting. Consider the kings of the road, the staff who spent their lives within this mobile sanctuary. Their legacy is one of invisible excellence. The conductors, the valets, and the chefs of the wagon slits created a standard of service that defined a century. They learned to read the moods of passengers by the way they held a teacup or the tension in their shoulders as they watched a border crossing. They were the silent architects of the dream, ensuring that the friction of travel never touched the guest. Their expertise was passed down like a secret language, ensuring that whether you were in the forests of Germany or the hills of Bulgaria, the experience of the Orient Express remained identical, a constant, unwavering thread of civilization. As the 19th century draws to a close, the train stands as a monument to the triumph of the industrial age. It represents the peak of steam technology before the arrival of the internal combustion engine and the airplane. It was the last great era of travel where the journey itself was as significant as the destination. In our modern age, we often seek to erase the distance between 2 points to arrive as quickly as possible. But the Orient Express taught the world the value of the in-between. It taught us that there is wisdom in the slow transition, and that the soul needs time to catch up with the body as it moves across the earth. The allure of the King of Trains persists because it captures a fundamental human desire, the wish to be carried away. It offers a total immersion in another reality. When you step aboard, you are not just entering a carriage. You are entering a state of mind. You are surrendering your agency to the rhythm of the tracks and the expertise of the crew. This surrender is the ultimate luxury in a world that was becoming increasingly regulated and scheduled. The Orient Express provided a loophole, a few days of suspended animation, where the only responsibility was to watch the world go by. Even now, as the sun sets over the Bosporus, the locomotive back at Circuit is being prepared for its return journey. The ashes are being cleared from the firebox. The brass is being polished. The linens are being replaced. Tomorrow, it will begin the long climb back through the Balkans, retracing the iron path toward the west. It will carry new stories, new secrets, and new dreamers. The cycle is eternal. The train does not merely travel, it breathes. It is a living link between the sunset and the sunrise, between the old world and the new. You walk to the balcony of your hotel room and look out over the city. The lights of Constantinople are a shimmering carpet of fire. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint, unmistakable sound of a train whistle. It is a haunting, lonely sound, but it carries a note of invitation. It reminds you that the road is always there, waiting. The tracks are still vibrating with the memory of your passage, and the horizon is never truly reached. The legacy of the Victorian train journey is the realization that the world is both smaller and larger than we imagined. It is smaller because we can cross it in a matter of days, but it is larger because every mile contains a history, a landscape, and a human life. The Orient Express did not just bridge the gap between Paris and Constantinople. It bridged the gap between the known and the unknown. It allowed us to touch the edges of the map without losing our way. As you prepare for your first night on solid ground in days, you find yourself missing the clack-clack of the wheels. You miss the amber glow of the gas lamps and the way the wood panels groaned like a ship's hull in a storm. You realize that you have become a creature of the rail. You have been initiated into a select group of travelers who have seen the sun rise over the Danube and set over the Marmara from the windows of the world's most famous train. This is the gift of the Orient Express. It gives you a piece of the world to keep, a rhythmic memory that will never truly fade. The Victorian age may pass, the steam may give way to electricity, and the borders of empires may shift, but the spirit of the journey remains. It is the spirit of curiosity, of elegance, and of the quiet, steady pulse of the Iron Road. Rest now, in the heart of the Orient. The journey has ended, but the dream continues. The tracks are calling, the engine is breathing, and the story of the express is written in the stars above the Golden Horn. You are home, and yet a part of you will always be moving, forever a passenger on the great silver needle of the night. To travel on the Orient Express is to be a passenger on a miracle of Victorian engineering. While we sit in the lap of luxury, surrounded by the scent of lilies and the taste of fine cognac, beneath our feet is a world of heat, pressure, and unyielding steel. The story of the route is a story of battle between man and the geography of Europe. When the first tracks were laid for the Company International des Wagenslits, the engineers faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable. They had to pierce the ancient limestone of the Alps, span the rushing, unpredictable waters of the Danube, and stabilize tracks across the shifting, marshy plains of the Balkans. This was an era before modern computers or GPS. It was a time of slide rules, heavy leather boots, and the raw power of thousands of laborers working with pickaxes and black powder. Think of the tunnels, the dark, echoing throats cut into the mountainsides. The Arlberg Tunnel, which the train traverses as it moves toward the east, was one of the greatest feats of its time. Imagine the darkness inside that mountain as the work began from both sides. Miners tunneling through the solid rock, praying that their calculations were correct and that they would meet in the middle. When they did, and the light finally broke through, it was more than just a hole in a mountain. It was a victory of the Victorian mind over the permanence of the earth. As our train glides through these tunnels today, the sound of the engine's roar is amplified, a booming reminder of the hollowed-out space that allows us to bypass the treacherous, snow-choked passes above. Then there are the bridges. To look out the window as the Orient Express crosses a high trestle in the Carpathian Mountains is to feel the fragility of human ambition. These bridges are masterpieces of latticework, iron, designed to be flexible enough to withstand the vibration of a 100-ton locomotive, yet strong enough to bridge chasms that have stood since the dawn of time. From the window, you see the intricate web of rivets and beams, painted a deep, industrial black, holding us suspended over the void. The sound changes as we cross. The rhythmic clack-clack of the rails becomes hollow and metallic, echoing off the canyon walls like the striking of a great bell. But the true hero of this engineering saga is the locomotive itself. In the 1880s and 90s, the steam engine was the pinnacle of human achievement. It was a beast of fire and water, a mechanical lung that breathed steam and exhaled power. The engines that pull the Orient Express are not mere machines. They are finely tuned instruments. The boiler, a massive cylinder of reinforced steel, holds water under immense pressure, heated by a furnace that consumes coal at a rate that would baffle the imagination. Imagine the footplate of that engine in the dead of night. While we sleep in our silk sheets, the driver and the fireman are engaged in a relentless, rhythmic labor. The fireman, his face slick with sweat and blackened by soot, swings a heavy shovel in a perfect arc, feeding the white-hot hunger of the firebox. He must know the personality of the engine, how much coal it needs for a steep climb, how to balance the water levels to prevent a catastrophic explosion. The driver stands with his hand on the regulator, his eyes fixed on the track ahead, reading the signals of the night. He feels the train behind him through the soles of his boots. He knows by the vibration if a wheel is slipping or if the brakes are dragging. There is a profound, silent communication between these men and the machine, a partnership that keeps the king of trains moving safely through the dark. The carriages themselves, the wagons are wonders of weight and balance, to achieve the level of silence and stability required for a luxury sleep. The carriages were built with heavy steel frames and double-walled tick bodies. The bogies, the wheel assemblies beneath the cars, were a revolutionary design, allowing the long carriages to pivot smoothly around the sharp mountain curves without the jarring jolts that plagued earlier trains. Every hinge, every latch, every brass fitting was designed to minimize noise. The Victorian engineer understood that luxury is not just what you see, it is what you don't feel. They engineered the absence of discomfort. As the train moves across the different nations, the engineering challenges shift. In the flat expanses of Hungary, the challenge was speed and endurance, maintaining a steady gallop across hundreds of miles of open plain where the winds could be fierce and the tracks could warp under the summer sun. In the Ottoman territories of Thrace, the challenge was the environment, keeping the delicate mechanisms of the train protected from the fine, abrasive dust and the intense heat of the southern sun. The Orient Express also relied on a massive, invisible infrastructure. Every few hundred miles, the train must stop to take on water and coal. These watering holes were the lifeblood of the route. Huge cast iron towers held thousands of gallons of water fed into the engine's tender through massive leather hoses. At these stops, the staff worked with the speed of a pit crew, lubricating the axles, checking the steam seals, and ensuring the beast was ready for the next leg of the journey. This logistical dance had to be performed perfectly across 6 different countries, requiring a level of international cooperation that was unprecedented in the 19th century. The tracks themselves are a testament to the labor of hundreds of thousands of nameless men. They were the ones who cleared the forests, drained the swamps, and hammered the iron spikes into the wooden sleepers. Every mile of the Orient Express is paid for in the sweat and toil of the Victorian working class. When we feel the gentle, rhythmic vibration of the rails, we are feeling the legacy of those who built the road. The iron is cold, but it was forged in heat and laid with hands that knew the weight of a sledgehammer. As we approach the end of this engineering tour, we must acknowledge the master of the clock. The Orient Express was governed by a schedule so precise it was used to set the watches of entire towns. The synchronization of time across Europe was a direct result of the railway. Before the train, every village had its own local time based on the sun. But the express required a universal railway time to ensure that 2 trains did not attempt to occupy the same stretch of track at the once. The engineering of the route was, therefore, not just an engineering of metal and stone, but an engineering of time itself. When you sit in your compartment and watch the sunset, take a moment to place your hand against the wall. Feel the faint, high-frequency hum of the machine. It is the vibration of thousands of parts working in perfect mechanical harmony. It is the sound of the steam heart beating, the iron skeleton holding firm, and the Victorian dream hurtling forward. We often think of the Orient Express as a romantic fantasy, a world of spies and silk. But it is, at its core, a triumph of the hard sciences. It is the result of chemistry, physics, and metallurgy pushed to their absolute limits. It is a monument to the idea that man can reshape the world in his own image, using nothing but fire, water, and the unyielding strength of his own mind. The engine out front gives a sharp, metallic whistler sound of pride. It knows the mountains it has climbed. It knows the rivers it has crossed. And as it pulls us toward the horizon, it does so with the confidence of a machine that has mastered the earth. The journey of the rails is a circle that never truly closes. As we stand at the threshold of our final chapter, the steam from our great locomotive drifting like a ghost through the rafters of the terminal, we must ask ourselves, why does this journey linger? Why, in an age of instant communication and effortless flight, do we still find our hearts beating in time with the clack-clack of a Victorian train? The answer lies in the eternal return, the realization that the Orient Express is not merely a relic of history, but a permanent landscape of the human imagination. As we prepare to leave the mahogany sanctuary of our carriage, take a final look around. The wood is worn smooth in places where thousands of hands have rested, seeking balance against the sway of the earth. The velvet of the armchairs holds the faint indentation of travelers who sat where you sit, watching the same moon rise over different empires. This train is a vessel of memories, a moving archive of the sighs, the laughter, and the silent contemplations of a century. It reminds us that while the destination is a point on a map, the journey is a state of being. The king of trains taught the world how to dream in motion. In the Victorian era, the Orient Express was the physical manifestation of the sublime. It offered the thrill of the unknown with the assurance of the familiar. It allowed the traveler to be a pioneer without sacrificing the comfort of a warm bath and a crisp linen sheet. This duality, the marriage of the wild and the refined, is the secret of its enduring magic. We long for the Iron Road because it represents a time when the world was still large enough to be mysterious, yet small enough to be embraced by a ribbon of steel. Consider the rhythm one last time. Ta-dan. Ta-dan. It is the heartbeat of progress, but it is also a primal sound, echoing the cadence of our own breath and the ancient pulse of the earth. Throughout our journey from the gaslit platforms of Paris to the sun-drenched shores of the Bosporus, this rhythm has been our constant companion. It has been a bridge between the silence of the mountains and the roar of the cities. It is a sound that promises continuity. Even when the engine is cold and the passengers have long since dispersed, the tracks themselves seem to vibrate with the ghost of that motion. A phantom music played upon the strings of the continent. The Orient Express also leaves us with a legacy of perspective. To travel at the speed of steam is to see the world at a human scale. You see the transition of the soil from the chalky white of France to the rich, dark loam of the Danube and the dusty red of Thrace. You see the architecture of the human spirit change, stone by stone, dome by dome. This journey has been a lesson in the interconnectedness of all things. The tracks do not divide, they stitch. They remind us that the other is just a few nights' sleep away, and that the same moon that lights the Seine also reflects in the waters of the Golden Horn. As the Victorian age faded into the 20th century and the steam engine eventually gave way to the sleek efficiency of electricity and the roar of the jet, the Orient Express did not disappear. It simply moved into the realm of myth. It became the setting for our most cherished stories of mystery and romance. It became the symbol of a lost elegance, a golden age where time was measured in courses of dinner and the turning of pages rather than minutes and seconds. We return to it in our dreams because we crave that suspension of reality, the feeling of being in between, where the worries of the world are held at bay by the thickness of a tick door. Now, the time has come to step off the train for the last time. The air of the platform is cool, and the sounds of the city are calling. But before you go, turn back and look at the engine. The fire in the belly is dying down to a warm orange glow. The steam is no longer a fierce roar, but a gentle, rhythmic sigh. The king of trains is resting, its long journey through the night and the day, through the mountains and the plains, completed once more. You carry the journey with you. It is in the way you now look at a horizon, expecting a line of telegraph poles to march toward the sun. It is in the way you listen to the wind, hearing the ghost of a whistle in the distance. You have been a passenger on the most magnificent machine ever built, and that experience has changed the way you move through the world. You have learned that luxury is not just found in silver and silk, but in the time to think, the space to wonder, and the rhythm to rest. The night is deep now, and the stars over the station are the same stars that watched over us in the Black Forest and the Balkan passes. They are the eternal witnesses to the road. As you walk away, your footsteps echoing on the stone, the sound of the train begins to fade. But listen closely. Beneath the noise of the modern world, there is a faint, persistent hum. It is the sound of the iron road, waiting. It is the promise that as long as there are tracks, and as long as there are dreamers, the Orient Express will never truly stop. The journey is a circle. The return is inevitable. Somewhere out in the darkness, an engine is being fired, a whistle is being tested, and a new traveler is stepping up the brass stairs into the amber glow of the carriage. The dream continues. The rhythm goes on. Farewell to the rails. Farewell to the night. To Datum, the steam fades. The stars remain. You are home, but the journey lives on forever in your heart.